She stepped inside like someone who expected to be corrected. The door closed behind her with a quiet click that sounded expensive, final, and uninterested in her explanation. The house smelled clean in a way that felt intentional, like even the air had been instructed not to linger too long. She held her shoes in her hands, wet soles facing down, fingers tight around the straps. Her shoulders stayed slightly rounded, not from cold, but from habit. She had learned early that posture could be an apology. "I won't take up space," she said quickly, before Silence could ask her questions. "I can sleep anywhere. I'll leave early." The words came out in the correct order, the order that usually worked. He didn't interrupt. That was unusual. Most people did. They either rushed to reassure her or rushed to take advantage of the opening. He did neither. He stood a few steps away, hands relaxed at his sides, eyes steady in a way that felt unhurried. "You can stay," he said. The sentence landed cleanly. No warmth, no threat. Relief flooded her body so fast, it almost felt like dizziness. Her muscles loosened without permission. She hated that part, hated how quickly her body learned new rules when survival was on the line. "Thank you," she said immediately. Then, because silence still felt dangerous, she added what she always added. "I'll do whatever you want." The room changed. Not loudly, not dramatically. The air tightened, just enough for her to notice. The lights didn't flicker. The walls didn't react. But something between them sharpened, thin and exact, like a line drawn carefully across the floor. He frowned, not with anger, with something closer to refusal. "No," he said. The word wasn't raised. It wasn't softened either. It sat there, heavy and undeniable. She blinked. She started, then stopped. Her mouth stayed open a second too long. That never happened. She was good with words. Words were how she survived. "You won't," he repeated. "Not here." Confusion crawled up her spine. That wasn't how this went. There were always rules. Sometimes written, sometimes implied, sometimes delivered with a smile that meant something else entirely. You learn them quickly, or you learn them painfully. "I didn't mean anything bad," she said, already adjusting. "I just meant I'll be easy, quiet, helpful." She shifted her weight without realizing it, angling herself slightly inward, smaller, like a suggestion rather than a presence. He watched her do it. That was worse. "I know what you meant," he said. "That's the problem." She swallowed. The dark humor of the moment struck her late and unwelcome. She had offered the one thing people usually wanted, and he had refused it like it was an inconvenience. "I don't understand," she said. "I know," he replied again, calmly. "You're not supposed to." He turned and walked down the hall without waiting to see if she followed. She did. The house revealed itself slowly. Clean lines, soft light, no clutter pretending to be personality. Everything felt chosen, not inherited, controlled without being cold. He stopped at a door and opened it. "Guest room," he said. "Bathrooms inside. Towels are clean. Lock it if you want." Lock it. The word landed strangely. Most places didn't offer locks. They offered expectations. She stepped inside, still holding her shoes like evidence. The room was too neat, the bed too smooth, the kind of space that expected rest, not gratitude. That made her uneasy. She turned back to him. "Thank you," she said again, automatically. He shook his head. "Don't," he said. The refusal hit harder this time. Her chest tightened. "I'm just being polite." "No," he said. "You're being obedient." The word pressed into her, dark and intimate in a way that made her feel seen too closely. Not her body, her pattern. "That's not required," he continued, "and it's not wanted." The tension lived there then, sharp and contained. Not sexual, not safe. Something adjacent. The kind of closeness that came from boundaries being named instead of crossed. She didn't know where to put her hands. "People don't usually say that," she said quietly. "I know," he replied. "They usually enjoy it." The honesty unsettled her more than cruelty would have. He stepped back, giving her space without breaking eye contact. "You can sleep," he said. "Eat if you're hungry. Leave when you want. No explanations." She nodded, too fast. Her body was still waiting for the correction, the moment when the cost would be revealed. It didn't come. He turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing," he said. Of course there was. Her spine straightened automatically, ready to receive instructions. "If you stay," he continued, "you stay as yourself, not as an offering." Her pulse stumbled. "That's not a favor," he added. "It's a condition." He left her there. The door closed softly behind him, not sealing her in, not shutting her out, just ending the moment. She stood alone in the room, the quiet pressing in from all sides. The bed waited without judgment. The lamp glowed patiently. Nothing demanded anything from her. That was the problem. She sat on the edge of the bed slowly, like it might reject her if she moved too fast. The mattress dipped slightly, accepting her weight without commentary. Her mind raced. She replayed the exchange, searching for the hidden rule, the unsaid expectation. There was always one. She had learned to find them early. They were safer when discovered quickly. But this one felt deliberately absent. The dark humor surfaced again, bitter and sharp. She had slept in worse places with clearer rules. She lay back fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. It was smooth, uncracked, untelling. Her body stayed tense, waiting for the moment she would be called back out, corrected, instructed, the moment she would be told how to behave properly. Minutes passed. Nothing happened. The house held steady around her, indifferent and precise. Somewhere down the hall, a door closed. Footsteps moved, unhurried. He existed in the same space without checking on her, without asserting control. That awareness settled into her chest, warm and unsettling. She realized then what had changed. He hadn't refused her body. He had refused her submission. And lying there, in a bed she had not earned, and comfort she had not paid for, she felt something unfamiliar and electric coil beneath her ribs. If obedience wasn't required, then neither was permission. The thought was dark, seductive, dangerous. Her eyes closed slowly, not in trust, but in exhaustion sharpened by curiosity. The night stretched on, quiet and watchful. And for the first time in her life, she slept without knowing what she owed. That was the most unsettling part of all. She woke in the dark, disoriented by how quiet it was. Not the fragile quiet of a place that might explode at any sound. This was steadiness, the kind of silence that assumed it would not be challenged. For a few seconds she didn't move, letting her body check for danger the way it always did after sleeping somewhere unfamiliar. There was none. The bed held her without complaint. The blanket had slipped down to her waist, warm but not heavy. Her clothes were still on. Her bag rested exactly where she had placed it, untouched. That alone felt suspicious. She sat up slowly and listened. The house breathed, not loudly, just enough to remind her it was awake even if no one else was. A distant hum moved through the walls, controlled and patient. She realized then that she had slept deeply. No half-waking, no rehearsing exits in her dreams. That bothered her. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and stood. The carpet accepted her weight without sound, making her feel larger than she wanted to be. She moved toward the bathroom, splashed water on her face, and studied her reflection. She looked calm. That was new. Calm usually came with cost. She stepped back into the hallway. Soft lights had turned on somewhere. Not bright, just enough to guide movement. The house was designed to notice without staring. She followed the glow toward the kitchen. He was there, standing at the counter, sleeves rolled up again, posture relaxed in a way that suggested he didn't need to perform control to have it. He didn't look at her immediately. He didn't need to. The air between them tightened anyway, the awareness returning like a held breath. "Sleep," he said. "Yes," she replied. Her voice came out steady. That surprised her. Coffee steamed in a cup near his hand. Another sat empty beside it. Not offered, just present. The distance between the cups felt deliberate. She hesitated, then stepped closer and reached for the empty one. The word rose in her throat. "Thank you." She swallowed it. She picked up the cup without speaking. He noticed. Of course he did. A faint shift in his posture told her that much. "That's better," he said quietly. The approval unsettled her more than disapproval would have. It wasn't praise. It was confirmation that something was changing and that he was watching it happen. She poured the coffee herself, hands steady, the small ritual grounding her. The smell was rich, expensive in a way she didn't try to decode. She took a sip and felt the warmth spread through her chest. Enjoyment came first. Shame followed closely behind. She set the cup down. "I'm not used to this," she said. "To coffee," he replied. "To not paying," she corrected. He leaned back against the counter, arms loose at his sides. "You paid," he said, "just not with obedience." The words slid into her slowly. "That feels like a trick," she said. "Yes," he replied. "Most. Freedom does." The dark humor of it sparked something sharp and alive in her. She almost smiled. Almost. She looked around the kitchen. Clean surfaces. Nothing waiting to be fixed. No task she could volunteer for without making it obvious she was trying to earn her place. That was the discomfort. "What happens now?" she said. "Now," he replied. "You exist without negotiating." She laughed softly, not amused. "That's not a skill I have." "You practiced all night," he said. "You just didn't realize it." She frowned. "I slept." Exactly. The implication landed with quiet force. Sleeping without permission. Resting without performance. Existing without a contract. The erotic tension lived there, dark and restrained, in the way the conversation circled something intimate, without touching it. Not desire, power, the refusal to exploit it. She moved to the window and looked out. Morning had thinned the dark into pale gray. The city beyond, the glass was waking, careless and loud even from a distance. "I should go," she said reflexively. He didn't stop her. He didn't agree either. "You can," he said, "or you can stay a while longer." The offer hovered between them, dangerous and clean. "And if I stay," she said. "You stay because you want to," he replied, "not because you're afraid to leave." That distinction mattered more than she wanted it to. She turned back to face him. "You don't want anything from me?" she said. "No." "Not even gratitude?" "No." The repetition stripped the room of illusions. She felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with her body. This was not seduction by pursuit. It was seduction by absence, by the removal of expected demands. Her pulse picked up despite herself. "That makes you dangerous," she said. He smiled faintly. "It makes me honest." She took another sip of coffee. Slower this time. Let the silence stretch. Without filling it. The house did not rush her. It did not lean in. That, she realized, was the trap. Comfort without conditions could make you forget how to leave. She set the cup down carefully. I don't want to forget who I am, she said. Then don't, he replied. Staying doesn't erase you. Kneeling does. The words hit close enough to hurt. She picked up her bag and slung it over her shoulder. The weight was familiar, grounding. Everything she owned, everything she answered for. I'm going to step outside, she said. He nodded, not approval, acknowledgement. She paused at the doorway, hand on the frame. Old instinct screamed at her to turn back, to seal the moment with politeness, to soften the exit with gratitude so it wouldn't feel unfinished. She didn't. She opened the door and let the cool morning air rush in. For a second, she stood there, caught between two worlds, one that demanded obedience to survive, one that refused to accept it. Behind her, the house remained still, not calling, not claiming. She stepped out. The door closed softly, not cutting her off, not chasing her away, just ending the exchange. She walked down the path slowly, letting the sound of the city grow louder. Each step felt deliberate, like she was learning how to occupy space without permission. Halfway to the street, she stopped and looked back once. The house stood exactly as it had before, calm, expensive, unbothered. She smiled then, dark and quiet. He hadn't refused her obedience to be kind. He had refused it because it bored him. And that realization followed her into the morning, sharp and electric, as she stepped fully into a life where comfort would no longer be paid for by shrinking. The night had let her sleep. The morning was asking her to stand. The street felt louder than she remembered. Cars moved too fast. Voices overlapped without waiting their turn. Someone laughed like they had never needed permission to exist. The world did not pause for her exit, and that alone made her chest loosen in a way she hadn't expected. She walked without a destination, not wandering, choosing not to choose yet. Each step pulled her further from the house and closer to something unsettled inside her. The night clung to her, not as fear, but as awareness. The refusal she had been given followed her like a quiet echo. You won't. The words had not been a command. They had been a removal, a door quietly taken off its hinges. She stopped at a corner and leaned against a cold metal pole, breathing in the city. The air smelled like fuel and coffee and damp concrete. Honest smells. Nothing curated. Her body reacted in small, confusing ways. A tension low in her stomach that wasn't hunger. A warmth that wasn't comfort. An alertness that felt intimate and dangerous at the same time. Obedience had always been simple. Offer it. Be accepted. Survive. Refusal had complicated everything. She crossed the street and entered a cafe she usually avoided because it felt like a place where people expected to be thanked. The bell rang. Someone looked up. Someone didn't. She ordered coffee and paid. The cup was handed to her. The word pressed forward again. Thank you. She paused. The barista was already moving on. She took the cup and sat near the window, fingers tight around the heat. Her reflection stared back at her in the glass, slightly distorted by steam. She looked taller somehow. Not physically, internally. The dark humor of it made her lips twitch. She had slept in a stranger's house and left more disturbed than when she had arrived. Not because she had been threatened, because she had been denied the chance to kneel. Her phone vibrated. An unknown number. She stared at it longer than necessary, then unlocked the screen. You walked away clean. The message read, no greeting, no demand. Her pulse shifted, slower now. She typed carefully. I didn't know that was allowed. The reply came after a pause that felt deliberate. Most people never test it. The tension returned, thin and electric. Not attraction, recognition. The kind that felt like standing too close to a line and realizing you had already crossed it. She sipped her coffee, letting the bitterness ground her. Why refuse it? She typed. Most people want it. Another pause. Because obedience is boring, came the reply. And dangerous. She exhaled slowly. That was the truth she hadn't wanted to hear. Obedience didn't just give power to the one who received it. It erased the one who offered it. Quietly, efficiently. She finished her coffee and stood, leaving the cup on the table without ceremony. No tip meant to apologize, no smile meant to soften. Outside, the sun had climbed higher. Confident now, the city moved with it. She walked toward a job center she'd been putting off for weeks, not because she expected help, but because she wanted to see how she moved through the world now. Inside, the air was stale, chairs lined up. People waited with their stories folded neatly in their laps. When her turn came, she spoke plainly. No rushing, no shrinking, no gratitude offered in advance. The person behind the desk listened, asked questions, typed notes, offered information without attaching tone to it. She walked out with a list and a time to return. It wasn't a miracle. It was something better. It was normal. The realization unsettled her more than luxury ever had. Normality without submission felt like stolen property. Her phone buzzed again as she stepped back into the street. "How does it feel now?" the message read. She didn't answer immediately. She walked, let the question sit, felt it in her body rather than her head. Unsteady, alive, exposed. She typed, like I, lost something I was taught to need. The reply came slower this time. "Good," it said. "That thing was never yours." She stopped walking. That sentence landed hard enough to make her close her eyes briefly. The city continued around her, indifferent. She understood then what had truly been refused. Not her obedience, her erasure. She opened her eyes and continued walking, posture straightening without effort. The tension remained, but it had changed shape. It was no longer pulling her backward. It was pushing her forward. Later that evening, she returned to her room. The familiar walls felt smaller, but not hostile. She dropped her bag and sat on the edge of the bed, hands resting loosely on her knees. Silence settled in. Not the expensive silence of the house. Her silence. She checked her phone one last time. No new messages. She didn't feel disappointed. She lay back and stared at the ceiling she had memorized over years. The cracks looked less like warnings now, more like history. Her body relaxed into the mattress. Sleep came easier than it had the night before. No rehearsing, no bargaining, no silent promises made to unseen judges. As she drifted, one final thought surfaced, dark and precise. The most seductive thing he had done was not offering her safety. It was refusing to take her surrender. And once that door had closed, there was no version of her that could walk back through it. The night passed quietly. Morning waited. The morning taught her a new kind of hunger. Not for food, not for comfort, for alignment. She woke with the sense that something had shifted overnight. Not dramatically, but precisely. Like a dial turned one careful notch. The room was the same narrow rectangle it had always been. Thin walls, familiar ceiling cracks, a window that argued with the light instead of welcoming it. Yet her body did not brace. She lay still for a moment, listening to the building wake up around her. Pipes complaining, a neighbor coughing, someone's alarm insisting on purpose. The city did not soften itself for her. She liked that. Getting dressed felt deliberate now. She chose clothes that did not apologize, shoes that made a sound, hair left as it was, unarranged, unoffered. Each choice stacked quietly, building a posture she had never practiced before. Outside, the street met her without ceremony. A man held a door open for the person behind her and let it close in her face. She smiled, small and private, and kept walking. The old reflex twitched, ready to smooth the moment with politeness. She let it pass. At the corner, a poster flapped loose from a pole, advertising something urgent and forgettable. She watched it for a second, then crossed against the light, not recklessly, just on time. Her phone buzzed. She did not look at it immediately. That mattered. She walked 2 more blocks before stopping, leaning against a cool brick wall and breathing in the city. Then she checked the screen. An unknown number again. "You move differently today." She felt the tension return, thin and exact. The same wire she'd learned to recognize, not a pull, an awareness. She typed. I stopped rehearsing. The reply came after a pause long enough to feel intentional. Good. Rehearsal is obedience pretending to be safety. She slipped the phone back into her pocket and pushed off the wall. The day tested her in small, deliberate ways. At the job center, a clerk spoke to her like a problem that needed managing. She listened without shrinking. She asked questions without softening them. The clerk adjusted, voice changing pitch, posture shifting to match. Power did that when it met resistance without hostility. At a cafe, a stranger tried to fold himself into her space with a smile that expected gratitude. She stepped aside, not fast, not rude, just exact. The man blinked, recalculated, moved on. Refusal, she learned, did not require an explanation. By noon, the tension in her body had changed shape, less coiled, more balanced, like something that had been held too tightly for years and was finally learning how to exist without constant instruction. She bought lunch from a place that smelled like oil and heat and honesty. She ate standing at a counter, elbow to elbow with people who did not look at her long enough to decide who she was. The food tasted simple and necessary. After, she walked. She let the city choose her pace. Her phone buzzed again. People will test you today, the message read. They always do after a shift. She smiled without humor and typed. I know the pattern now. The reply came slower. Then you know where it breaks. She stopped at a crosswalk and waited for the light, feeling the pull to answer more, to say something clever or soft or impressive. She didn't. The light changed. She crossed. By afternoon, the old reflex tried a different angle. It suggested she was being difficult, ungrateful. That refusal would cost her later. That comfort, when offered, should be handled carefully, like a fragile animal that might bite if startled. She acknowledged the thought and let it pass. In the late light, she found herself near the neighborhood she usually avoided. New buildings, clean glass, quiet sidewalks, the kind of place that mistook calm for virtue. She walked through it anyway. At a lobby desk, a security guard looked up, assessing. She met his eyes, nodded once, and kept moving. He hesitated, then returned to his screen. Nothing happened. That was the point. She sat on a bench outside and watched the reflections slide across the buildings. Her phone buzzed once more. You crossed a line today, the message said. She considered the words. Yes, she typed. Mine. The reply came after a long pause. That is the only one that matters. The erotic tension lived there, dark and restrained, not in bodies, but in recognition sharpened into something intimate. Not ownership, not desire, the shared understanding of restraint. She locked the phone and stood. As evening approached, the city softened its edges. The light warmed. Sounds slowed. She walked home with a steadiness that surprised her, like her body had learned a new gait. Inside her room, she opened the window and let air in. She cooked something simple and ate at the table instead of the bed. She washed the dishes immediately, not as penance, but as preference. Later, she lay back and stared at the ceiling, feeling the aftertaste of the day settle in her muscles. Not exhaustion, satisfaction without applause. Her phone buzzed one last time. If you keep this, the message read, people will try to buy it from you. She typed without hesitation. They won't be able to afford it. No reply came. She didn't wait for one. The night folded in gently, without demand. She slept without rehearsing, without bargaining, without offering anything up front. In the dark, she understood the final shape of it. He had not refused her obedience to teach her a lesson. He had refused it to see if she would keep herself intact when no one was watching. She had, and tomorrow would test it again. She welcomed that. The edge where she had stopped kneeling had become ground she could stand on. The change did not announce itself. It arrived quietly, like confidence usually does, after it has stopped needing witnesses. She woke before her alarm and stayed still, listening to the city stretch. A bus sighed at the corner. Someone argued softly through a wall. Pipes rattled, then settled. The world resumed without consulting her, and for the first time she didn't feel behind it. She got up and made her bed. Not carefully, not perfectly, just enough to mark the space as hers. In the mirror, she noticed something subtle. Her shoulders rested where they belonged. Her eyes didn't search for approval before meeting their own reflection. She looked like someone who expected to remain. Outside, the morning felt cooperative rather than demanding. She walked with no urgency, the tension from the last days settling into something steadier, usable. Not sharp anymore, aligned. At the job center, the receptionist greeted her by name. That surprised her more than it should have. Familiarity without possession, recognition without debt. She filled out forms and handed them back without rushing. When a detail needed correction, she corrected it calmly. No apology, no explanation. The clerk nodded and moved on. Again, nothing dramatic happened. That was the victory. By afternoon, the call came. Not life-changing, not cinematic. Just an offer that was fair, clean, and honest. Hours she could manage. Pay she could plan with. Expectations clearly stated. She accepted without overperforming her gratitude. "Sounds good," she said, and meant it. When she hung up, she didn't shake. She didn't laugh. She didn't cry. She exhaled. On the walk home, the city felt different again. Not gentler, not richer, but familiar in a way that suggested she belonged to it without asking permission. She bought herself coffee from the place that knew her face now. The barista smiled. She smiled back, no transaction hidden inside it. Her phone buzzed once more. The same number. She didn't tense this time. "You kept it," the message read. She leaned against a sun-warmed wall and typed slowly. "Yes." The reply took longer than usual. Most people trade it back the moment comfort appears. She watched a couple pass, laughing about something small and private. Life moved in ordinary, generous ways. "I know the difference now," she wrote. "Comfort isn't the reward. Choice is." Another pause. "Then this is where I step out." The message came back. "You don't need a witness anymore." She smiled, not out of relief, but understanding. "That was the point," she typed. No reply followed. She didn't check again. That evening, she cooked a real meal and sat at the table, window open, letting the sounds of the street mix with the smell of food. She ate slowly. She left the dishes for later because she wanted to, not because she was tired of earning rest. Later, she walked outside as the sky darkened. The night felt familiar now, not something to endure, something to move through. She passed buildings that once intimidated her, glass and light and guarded doors. They no longer suggested authority, just architecture. She didn't wonder if she would ever belong in places like that. She already belonged where she was. Back in her room, she turned on the lamp she used to save for guests and lay on the bed with a book she'd been meaning to read for months. The words came easily. Her mind didn't wander toward contingency plans. Before sleep, she thought of the house again, the quiet, the refusal, the moment she had offered obedience like currency and watched it be declined. That had been the seduction, not safety, not luxury, freedom without permission. He had given her nothing tangible, and that had changed everything. She slept deeply, without negotiation, without rehearsal, without fear of the morning. When she woke, sunlight filled the room, unbothered by her presence. She smiled into it, slow and unguarded. She had slept there once, but she had learned to wake up here, with herself intact, with her choices unclaimed, with obedience left behind like an old habit she no longer needed to survive. And that, she knew, was the happiest ending she could have written for herself.